Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And for everyone out there, I hope you had a great Merry Christmas with family and friends and celebrating the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ and are anticipating an awesome start to 2024. But before that, we got to talk about West Virginia and their appearance in the Duke's Mayo Bowl tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN from Charlotte, North Carolina, Bank of America Stadium, home of the Carolina Panthers. And our Mountaineers, 8-4, 6-3 in conference play, taking on the home team, I guess, in a bowl game. The North Carolina Tar Heels, 8-4, 4-4 in ACC play. West Virginia, a 6.5-point favorite in this game with an over/under of 54.5 for all of those who care what happens in Vegas. And then on the ESPN matchup predictor, this is the interesting part. I'm wondering if the matchup predictor is broken for ESPN. 61% favoring West Virginia. So, as I like to do in all of these preview matchups for this special bowl edition, I want to talk a little bit about the history. I want to talk about what's on the line for both teams. We'll talk about what to look for on both sides of the ball when both North Carolina has the ball and West Virginia has the ball. My 3 keys to victory for the Mountaineers, and then obviously a prediction at end. So, starting it off here for today's show, let's talk about what's on the line for both teams. And we'll talk first about the home team, as I said, the North Carolina Tar Heels. And honestly, not a lot tangibly. I think this is a conclusion, a soft landing to what I'm sure many North Carolina fans will consider really a disappointing season, win or lose, to get to 9 wins for the season, considering this was Drake May's final season in Chapel Hill, arguably one of the best quarterbacks in school history and a projected top 5 NFL draft pick. North Carolina started out this season 6-0 and ranked as high as 10th in the country, but went 2-4 down the stretch, including a rivalry game loss, 39-20 to NC State to end the regular season. So really just you just get this feeling from North Carolina that there was more to be had for this season. Losses to Georgia Tech, losses to Virginia, only beat Duke in double overtime, beat Appalachian, sorry for my pronunciation, in overtime. Did beat South Carolina to start the season by 2 touchdowns, but you thought there could be even more to be had for this season. But it seemed like it was Drake May and a lot of individual pieces, not necessarily a cohesive team. If you're a North Carolina fan tuning into this broadcast, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the season. Leave your comments here on this page. Do you agree with me to an extent? But I would say intangibly, there's a few things I would say that why North Carolina will want to get up for this game. I think number one, first and foremost, as I've said twice now, being that this game is played in your home state, just 2 hours and 10 minutes away from Chapel Hill to downtown Charlotte. I think that North Carolina should travel well, should have a lot of home state fans that in the Charlotte area, so they should be able to pack the house, and of course whenever kickoff happens they'll want to win this game. But so I would say that's one. Number two, could this be Mack Brown's final game as head coach? I know this has come up every year for the last few years, but this seems as reasonable and appropriate as a time as any, with Drake May heading off to the NFL. He's your star player. You see this constantly. We saw this with West Virginia whenever Will Grier went off to the NFL, that Dana Holgorsen bolted. Does Mack Brown leave North Carolina kind of high and dry and retire? He is 72 years old, will turn 73 just before the start of next season, and we've seen so many other 70 or older year old coaches who are high profile with the demands of today's college athletics, with the transfer portal and NIL, have retired recently, more so I feel like in college basketball than college football. But I mean, the same questions get asked of Nick Saban here about winning a national title. I know a Mayo Bowl is a lot different than a national title, but what does much more does Mack Brown really need to coach for? So that's a question. Is this potentially his last game? We saw that back in 2010 with the Gator Bowl with Bobby Bowden in his final game as head coach with Florida State. So could be, but no news has really come out as in regards to that as of just about 24 hours out from game time. And then number 3, and this is again a little intangible, I think it's posturing is what I'll call it for realignment. And if you followed social media and you're in the news in the last week, I know around Christmas time it's your thoughts are in other places, but Florida State is single-handedly trying to bolt and crush the ACC's grant of rights, which, as we know, are the only things that are keeping the hateful 7 or whatever Brett McMurphy deemed them over this past summer in saying. And right alongside Florida State, North Carolina with Clemson has been 3 of the most outspoken teams in the ACC conference about trying to break away, talking about the financial ramifications and how far behind the ACC teams will be behind the SEC and the Big Ten. So if in North Carolina being the flagship athletic program of the state of North Carolina is that, I think it's signature school that both the Big Ten or the SEC are going to try and, would love to have to expand that media market as well in Charlotte. Their footprint either, north in the SEC or south in the Big Ten. I think North Carolina with its basketball programs, with its baseball programs, with its high academics, I think North Carolina is a very, very attractive program, and you want to, I think, put this football program in similar light in the national perception as its basketball program. So to end the season with 9 wins, I would say that the football program hasn't taken necessarily a huge step back in Drake May's final year. Looking ahead for 2024 might be something to be able to sell in conference realignment, transfer portal recruiting. It's always those kinds of things. So that's what I would say for North Carolina is not a lot of rah-rah for unlike West Virginia's side pre-game, but once this game kicks off, they'll want to obviously win this game. But for West Virginia's side, a few things I would say to play for. For West Virginia, this would be just the 20th time in program history that West Virginia has reached 9 wins for a season. And after being picked to finish 14th in the Big 12 Conference preseason, I think this will complete one of the nation's best examples of overachieving. And I say that, and I don't think I need to necessarily add any sort of context to defend that. With the way that this media just left West Virginia for dead over the summer, and we've talked about it countless times, to get to 9 wins for this season, nobody expected that. I know the losses. I'm very, very aware of the losses that West Virginia's had, notably Houston, in games that you can't necessarily afford to lose. And considering the context of the schedule for this season and the strength of which, or lack thereof, that West Virginia ended up playing. But again, to get to 9 wins for a season, few programs in college football can say that for an entire season. So to get to that benchmark, that's a huge accomplishment for Neal Brown in this program. Number 2, beating a Power 5 opponent in a bowl game. So remember, in Neal Brown's 5 years at West Virginia, they only played in 3 bowl games. They've only won 1 of them, and one of them was against a G5 opponent in Army, and they pulled it out, thankfully, at the very end, thanks to good old Austin Kendall. So to beat a Power 5 opponent in a bowl game, and if you exclude really the 3 wins that West Virginia had against the new Big 12 conference members, that's UCF, BYU, and Cincinnati, this would be West Virginia's 5th win against a Power 5 opponent. And you look at those 5 wins against Power 5 opponents, or 4 wins, 3 of those were by 7 points or fewer. So we're looking at TCU, we're looking at Texas Tech, we're looking at Pitt, and that was and what's the last one I'm thinking of? Oh, and Baylor to end the season, and you pulled it out in the final minute to win by 3. So, and then you look at the other, that was the outlier, that was more than 7 points. It was just a 17-6 backyard brawl game in which, again, you circled the wagons and your defense led you to victory in that one. So West Virginia hasn't had very many to wins to do it convincingly. I think even against a North Carolina team, and we'll talk about this in a second, of how this roster is really just depleted because of injuries and the transfer portal. But to just do that, to win against another Power 5 opponent in a bowl game in which West Virginia has been very mediocre in its history, in 130 years of college football in bowl games, has not always been the greatest. And we got to go back all the way to Dana Holgerson's first year, in which West Virginia has won a bowl game convincingly. The only other time that West Virginia won a bowl game under Dana Holgerson was that Cactus Bowl out in Arizona, in which they barely pulled it out in the fourth quarter against Arizona State. So given all the history with West Virginia in bowl games, given this season's context with playing against Power 5 opponents, I think to do so and make a statement to win convincingly would mean a lot of momentum for this program. And this is what I talked about a few weeks ago. This is the continuation of the end of this regular season of 2023 into the start of the year 2024, where West Virginia can start to build momentum for 2024 to potentially be a special year. So going back to my list of what Neal Brown needs to do to put West Virginia into the best possible situation for 2024 list. So number one, retaining the indispensable list. And so far, up to today, December 26th, so far so good in a lot of aspects of what West Virginia is able to do with Country Roads, Trust, in tandem, and retention. Number two, as I said, win the bowl game. Win the bowl game, build that momentum, leave a positive taste in everybody's mouths to end the season and keep it going. And they already, just 6 days ago on National Signing Day, did one of my other three things, or big things on my list for 2024, pulling off a late edition on National Signing Day, 4-star wide receiver, Day Farmer. So far so good. Next, checking that box so far, kind of like in pencil, so we can erase it if need be with the indispensable list and retention. Still have a lot more to go on that point. And then the bowl game. So another check mark could be had for this one. So very, very intriguing matchup, I think, for West Virginia's sake. And looking at the matchup history, we just have 2 games worth of history to talk about, both bowl games. A 1-1 for both sides. North Carolina won the 1997 Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, under then head coach Mack Brown, who was in his first stint at North Carolina, then going to Texas, then coming back to North Carolina. 20-13 Tar Heels won that game. And then no one can forget the 2008 Meineke Car Care Bowl, 31-30 West Virginia victory. Legend, the great one, Pat White's last game as a Mountaineer, passing for over 330 yards and 3 touchdowns despite a heroic effort by North Carolina's wide receiver Hakeem Nicks, who ended up going on to the NFL and having a career with the New York Giants. 8 catches for 217 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was sensational in that matchup, but still, White got the last laugh for head coach Bill Stewart, the late Bill Stewart, and then moving into that post Pat White, early Geno Smith era. So, Jarrett Brown, the transition here in between that. So 1-1, both. So coming back. Last time West Virginia playing, it's same Charlotte, North Carolina, same bowl game, different name, same opponent. So very interesting. Different surface though, turf field instead of a grass field. Very interesting note there. That's been a big contentious point down there at Bank of America Stadium, playing on a natural grass surface versus turf. But so I think one sub note that we need to talk about in context of talking about on both sides of the ball is who's playing in this game, because unfortunately that's what you have to talk about in bowl games in the year 2023, unless you're in the college football playoff, is how many players have opted out, how many players have left for the transfer portal, how many players are just still dealing with injuries. So for North Carolina, this team has been really decimated, and that's why I say this is for the Tar Heels going to have a look and feel of a glorified spring game, in which it looks to really feature a bunch of young players. There's 7 starters out for the Tar Heels between those opt-outs and injuries and portals. Quarterback Drake May being the most notable one, the player who would have made this game so much more interesting for both sides of the field, and would have loved to see Drake May play in this contest in front of his hometown crowd for one last college game. Would have loved to see this. But also starting center Corey Gaynor, who started every game for the last 2 years for the Tar Heels. He's headed to the NFL draft, opting out of this bowl game. Same with leading wide receiver Tez Walker, who also is going to the NFL draft after really fighting and North Carolina fighting on his behalf to get him eligible for this season, but he's not going to play in this bowl game. North Carolina's top 2 tight ends, John Copenhaver and Bryson Nesbitt, both are dealing with injuries. Both won't play in this contest. And then on defense, 2 players of note. Their leading tackler, Cedric Gray, who's the heart and soul of North Carolina's defense, going to the NFL draft, opting out of this game. And also cornerback Elijah Huzzy, who's dealing with an injury in the secondary. So North Carolina will be without a few players who are also on its too deep of note. Wide receiver Kobe Paysor, big target at 6'5", safety Will Hardy, and also offensive lineman Zach Rice. Flipping on the other side of the ball for the team we care about, West Virginia. As we know, starting center Zach Frazier, who was injured at the end of the Baylor game a month ago, broken foot. You've seen him, if you've been following on social media, walking around in a boot. He won't be in today's contest. Brandon Yates instead sliding in for him at center, as he's done at multiple positions this season. But the backup center who will start for this contest, C.J. Donaldson at running back, who again allegedly tore his labrum and likely it was done in the Oklahoma game, and he played through the last 2 games of the season. So what a warrior by Donaldson. Had surgery. Now he's just recovering to prepare for the 2024 offseason. And then to be determined, game time decision on wide receiver Preston Fox, who likely had a concussion from the Baylor game, slammed his head hard off the turf in that Baylor game on a magnificent catch in that contest. So we'll see what happens. Also at starting nose tackle, Mike Lockhart's already transferred to SMU, getting more money from the Ponies to play for that program in whatever conference they may play in next season. And then also safety Hershey McLaurin, who wasn't necessarily a starter but had played a lot of snaps for this defense all season long. He's in the transfer portal, no longer part of the program at this point in time. So that's kind of setting the stage. Again, North Carolina with a lot more, with many of its best soldiers not in this contest for this battle against West Virginia. But West Virginia does have some names that changes a bit of the context, just a little bit for this one. So let's talk about what to look for when both teams have the ball. Start out with North Carolina. So North Carolina is turning to its redshirt freshman quarterback Connor Harrell, who's making his first career start and whose only real extended period of play this season was November 4th in garbage time against FCS in-state opponent Campbell. So not a lot to take from that performance, but Harrell did make the most of his opportunity. Went 4 for 4 passing for 71 yards and a touchdown, with 61 yards on 2 attempts and a touchdown rushing. So did come in and scored 2 touchdowns in just a short period of time. So good for him. We've seen how West Virginia has struggled over the years against first-time starting quarterbacks. I don't know why this is, but it seemed to just stretch over, like a 20-year period, I feel like, but especially ones who are mobile. I'm thinking back to Texas. His name escapes me off the top of my head, but Texas Tech's quarterback, a few years ago, and how much trouble when he would come into the ball game and just run all over West Virginia's defense. So my question for this contest is, can West Virginia's defense get back to the way it stymied TCU's Chandler Morris and Texas Tech's Barron Morton way back in September, with time off to heal and prepare for this contest? So Beanie Bishop playing, Lee Koba playing, Sean Martin playing, all 3 of your leaders at all 3 levels of the defense. Can they come out there against a guy who's had no starting experience and go out there and shut down this run game? So and this is really the star player to watch for in this game for North Carolina. North Carolina deploys one of the nation's best backs at running back. Sophomore Omarion Hampton, Doak Walker Award finalist, fell a little bit short to Ollie Gordon, but had a sensational season as a sophomore. player from the state of North Carolina representing his home state schools. So 1,456 yards and 15 touchdowns rushing on 234 carries to go along with 215 yards and a touchdown receiving on 26 catches. He's had 7 100-plus yard games to go along with a season-high 234 yards in Week 2 against Appalachian State. Was held to just 28 yards on 3 carries a month ago at NC State in the regular season finale. But before that, 6 straight games with over 100 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns during that span. So to put that in context for you, if you put together C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White's numbers together, you would get just over Hampton's production from a carries and yards standpoint, but very close, and has more rushing touchdowns than the two of them combined. So he's sensational. Put those two players, and that's what you get in Hampton for North Carolina and what he means for this team. So you're going to see that I would imagine you're going to see that out of the read option. You're going to see a lot of Hampton, and you're going to, especially early, to get Harrell comfortable and into the flow of the game. And Harrell's going to use the read option off him to try and run the ball. So can West Virginia stack the box, designate enough players to take care of Harrell while at the same time getting after Hampton? And can West Virginia, as I said, get back to the way it defended running backs in September, in the way it shut Taj Brooks down and Amani Bailey in back-to-back weeks, and also Rodney Hammond from Pitt even going back a week prior to the backyard brawl, versus the way that they covered teams down the stretch, most notably because of all the injuries that have really stacked up, especially at linebacker, and taking the toll of playing an 11-game Power 5 opponent schedule. So and looking at North Carolina's top 6 receiving targets, 4 of them are out. So, wow. Who does North Carolina have to throw to in this game? Really 2 guys I'm looking at that are starting in this contest, wide receiver J.J. Jones and Nate McCollum. So Jones, bigger body, 6'2", 210 pounds, 42 catches, leading the team for 42 catches, leading the team for North Carolina, 658 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving. So you'd imagine Beanie Bishop is going to go mano-a-mano with him in this game. And then Nate McCollum, a little bit smaller, 5'8", 185 pounds, didn't miss 3 games due to injury this year, but still productive, 39 catches for 428 yards and a touchdown. So Malachi Ruffin draw him, or does one of the safeties in the slot draw him mainly? Gavin Blackwell is really rounding out the starting lineup, 6 catches in 10 games played for this season. Not a whole lot of involvement for him. And then a whole bunch of true freshman wide receivers for North Carolina will see action in this game if they rotate in or just stick with a lot of between Jones and McCollum. So North Carolina does not have a scholarship tight end playing in this contest. So again, it's going to be hard to move the ball for this North Carolina offense against this West Virginia defense, feeling again like a spring game out there. So that's my biggest question is if Bishop and Ruffin go mano-a-mano with Jones and McCollum, can't the rest of this West Virginia defense concentrate on stacking the box, shutting down Hampton, and then forcing Harrell to beat this West Virginia defense himself in in his first real start? And can West Virginia create pressure if he holds onto the ball, looks down to his second, third reads, doesn't know what he's, seeing defensively? Can Sean Martin make an impact? Can Eddie Vesterinen make an impact? Tamia Duraje, Fator Mamolba, who's going to get the start over Lockhart, who's now transferred. So can we see, again, this tough, stout West Virginia defense that we saw in the first 5 games of the season when West Virginia started out the season 4-1, or will we see a lot of what we saw in the back half and not being able to necessarily take down defenders on a read option, make tackles in space? That's what I want to see. And then get down a comparable running back to Ollie Gordon, because he just shredded the West Virginia defense. And again, I know it's because West Virginia was having to defend spread out cast of wide receivers. And Alan Bowman was just efficient on that day against Oklahoma State. Jaden Bray, who's now a Mountaineer in the transfer portal, made some awesome moves to score a touchdown in that contest. Oklahoma State did just enough to win in that game. So I can see, in a way, this kind of being comparable, but not necessarily. Bowman being like a 6th, 7th year starter and a guy making his first career start at quarterback. So that's why I cannot believe where this number is at 6.5. Like, that's just insane to me. I guess they're going off West Virginia's history and bowl games and, just the way that they finished out against Baylor. But again, and I think also the way that the game script and game flow. So I don't want to put too much pressure on the West Virginia defense, because I do think the West Virginia offense is going to be able to help them out. So let's go to that side of the ball. Let's talk about when West Virginia has the ball and what to expect. So I want to first talk really about what I would suspect is the overall game plan, or what it should be. And then discuss really the position grouping / individual matchups within the game that I'm looking for when West Virginia has the ball and North Carolina is on defense. So number one, I think we should see more passing in this game than we've probably seen all year. So with no C.J. Donaldson and no Justin Johnson, who's hit the transfer portal, between Green as the quarterback doing the running. Also, the rushing attack includes just Jaheim White, Jalen Anderson, who knows where his head's at in this game with potentially hitting the portal probably, Thursday morning. And then maybe we see DJ Oliver, the true freshman running back who's been only just used in the Duquesne game. Haven't had to really deploy him for this season. So really down to 3 running backs in addition to Green. I think at wide receiver, you have a bunch of guys who are looking to feast. Looking first and foremost at Devin Carter, who's playing in his last collegiate game in his home state against his former school's rival. Hudson Clement's finally fully healthy and coming off a big game against Baylor. Cole Taylor's your leading receiver at tight end. Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher have really come up hot in these last 4 or 5 games. I think that this receiving core is looking to eat. The boys are buzzing there, and they're looking to do it against this susceptible pass defense of North Carolina and score in bunches and make some big plays. And why I say this pass defense is susceptible, North Carolina is 99th in the country at allowing 242 yards per game through the air. Now they're without their best defensive back in Elijah Huzzie, as well as North Carolina's best overall defender in Cedric Gray. So I don't know necessarily if Green's going to break his season best passing performance, 391 yards against Houston. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I think this should be at least his second best performance. I would put that right at 300. Can he get to that 300 passing yard mark, and can these wide receivers make plays all over the field and make this, really a game that they can put on their highlight reels again for Carter for the, potentially to get any looks as an undrafted free agent, and then to continue to build those profiles for Cole Taylor, Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher, etc. So then the other matchup that I'm looking for within the offense versus defense is WVU's offensive line versus North Carolina's defensive line. And I think this is where there is a bit of an intriguing matchup. Looking at North Carolina's 3 technique, number 8, Miles Murphy, a big dude, 6'4", 310 pounds, a senior. He has declared for the NFL draft, but is going to play in this game. So who does he go up against with now Frazier out for this contest, sliding in Yates, who knows, might be the starting center for 2024, but with 2 guys alongside him who have seen lots of snaps, a lot of games played, and will once again be counted on for 2024. So Yates at center, Jaquay Hubbard at right guard, Tomas Remack at left guard, all healthy, taking on Miles Murphy. And then on the outside, the Jack linebacker, which I guess would be equivalent to West Virginia's Bandit linebacker, number 25, Kamon Rucker. He's North Carolina's team leader in sacks and tackles for loss, 3rd on the team in tackles. He has 8.5 sacks, 14 tackles for loss, respectively. So he'll be going up against Wyatt Milam on one side, the left side, and Doug Nestor on the right side. So how does West Virginia block those two players? And looking at North Carolina's defense as a whole, they, just like West Virginia, deploy a 3-3-5 stack scheme that poses really as that 4-2-5 with Rucker playing up on the line, with also behind him a former West Virginia transfer portal target, Amari Gaynor, who picked the Tar Heels over the Mountaineers in his final two coming from Florida State. He'll be backing Rucker up, but I'm sure we'll see Gaynor involved in this game. And then that linebacker, the two guys that you're going to hear a lot of their names being called, a number 23 junior, Power Eccles, love that name. He'll make the most tackles. He's second leading tackler on the team, alongside freshman number 17 linebacker Amare Campbell. So I think this is going to be a case point of West Virginia's passing offense opening up the run game with improvisations by Garrett Green. So very similarly, I feel like in some of its best offensive outputs so far this year. And again, West Virginia hasn't really had has looked like a completely different offense once Green's developed more of his confidence, had more experience in this back half of this season, and we've seen what an addition Jaheim White has been to make this team more explosive. So if Brown and Chad Scott decide, all right, let's go, let's torch them from the start, and move the ball down the field in waves, just taking advantage, just like they did in the first half against Baylor, at least offensively. I think that we're going to see a really, really, awesome offensive performance that's going to get us excited for 2024. So let's talk about special teams real quick. I like to talk about special teams briefly because it's an overlooked part of the game. So kickers, North Carolina may have just a slight edge. North Carolina's kicker Noah Burnett, like what I see on his numbers for the season. Not a lot of kicks, just like Hayes, but 18 for 19 on the season with a long of 48. North Carolina's also used Ryan Coe 4 times, with Coe nailing a 47-yarder, but Coe's already been in the transfer portal and committed to Cal, so won't see him in this contest. It'll be Burnett doing the kicking duties, and he's a good one. And then, on West Virginia side, Michael Hayes, 14 for 17 on the season with a long of 49. Was huge in a couple of contests, those pivotal wins in September against Texas Tech and TCU. A little quieter down the stretch, but really started to get his confidence back, I think, in the last two contests against Cincinnati after he missed a kick, and then into the Baylor contest especially was awesome. So we'll see how Hayes gets involved. Looking at the punters, West Virginia's got the advantage, definitely. Loving Ollie Straw for the year. 39 punts, 42.6 yards per punt average, 18 inside the 20, and 7 over 50 plus. If you look at North Carolina's two punters, and they spread it between two guys, Tom Maginus, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Ben Kiernan, 38 punts of the team's 44 for the season, averaging 40 yards per punt, just 16 inside the 20 and 4 of 50 plus. So Straw just beating the production of those two collective players. And then it's going to be a struggle for North Carolina in the punting and kicking returns. North Carolina's punt returner Nate McCollum has only had one return for -1 yards on the season, and kick returner Chris Culver has not returned a kick so far this season. But apparently was like an all-state track, so he's got some speed. So let's see how West Virginia's kickoff coverage, which has been suspect at times, especially in that Baylor game, giving up 2 kickoff returns for a touchdown to Baylor's Richard Reese. Let's see how West Virginia's kickoff coverage does in this contest. Best thing I would feel like is for Hayes to just boot the ball out of the end zone and start North Carolina out at the 25. So, and then on the opposite side for West Virginia, I'm wondering how things might potentially change. Does Beanie Bishop get more involved, wanting to show off his special teams abilities to increase his profile for the NFL draft, with Preston Fox potentially sidelined for this game due to that concussion or potential concussion from the Baylor game. So see if we see Jaheim White involved on special teams. Who gets involved? I guess it'll be like a lot. Like again, this feels like a glorified spring game in a way for both teams. So let's talk about the 3 keys to victory real quick. I think number one, first and foremost, I think the key to victory is let it be obvious to people in the stands and watching on TV who wants to be there and who wants to win this game. I don't think this cannot be a repeat of the Houston game, and I think thankfully this will help that West Virginia is going to have an awesome traveling crowd there in Charlotte. So going to be a lot of blue and gold in the stands instead of just the powder blue from North Carolina. So if North Carolina has a lackluster showing still in their home state, Mountaineer Nation is going to just keep this team juiced, keep them alive, keep them wanting to score in bunches and win and make a statement. So don't let this be a game that just seems quiet and namby-pamby like the first half was against Houston. And then I just still think this is a huge demerit against this coaching staff is from that Houston game is how they even said in the post game, and some players too, we were overlooking Houston. We were looking ahead of this matchup after a bye week. So there's been a long layoff. West Virginia didn't get to a bowl game last season, so a lot of players on this team. There's very few even left from that guaranteed rate bowl just a couple of seasons ago with all the transfer portal turnover. So let's see if there's this new culture, this just energetic young core just wants to get involved and make this a very exciting matchup. Number 2, I'm going to quote the late great DMX from his song Party Up in Here, make it rain so heavy it curse the head. It's rained all day apparently today here or not here, raining all day in Charlotte. Sounds like the rain's going to continue into Wednesday and into like close toward game time tomorrow, but then it's going to clear out and provide nice weather conditions for the Mountaineers playing on turf, so not playing again. I talked about that with the natural grass surface, so it's not going to be just a complete mud bath out there. And you saw that in the 2008 matchup. If you go back and watch those highlights, that Meineke Car Care Bowl, that field was just a complete mess that Pat White was playing and that West Virginia offense was playing in. So totally different. I think that's going to favor West Virginia. Again, I think better weather conditions favor the better passing offense and moving the ball quickly in bunches downfield. So with but bring the rain from the passing offense and Garrett Green. Throw those teardrops in the bucket like we saw Jaheim White in that Cincinnati game, Traylon Ray early in the first quarter against Baylor. Let's make some big plays in the passing offense. I want to see that for West Virginia's offense. And then eventually, my third key to victory, break the dam like the 2012 Orange Bowl. It was still a 28-20 game with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left to play in the first half before West Virginia went on an offensive rally and buried Clemson, going up at the half 49-20 and really coasting through the second half, just nail in the coffin after nail in the coffin on Clemson. So what I will say for West Virginia in this contest, and again, West Virginia not having the greatest experiences in bowl games since that Orange Bowl and winning convincingly, barely beating Arizona State in the Cactus Bowl, barely beating Army in the Liberty Bowl. So to turn a new page in bowl games from, wow, can't believe that, almost 12 years in the past. So can West Virginia do that? Can they score 30 to 35 points in the first half to then potentially coast in the second half and make enough of a statement to maybe, just maybe, very doubtful, but there's always a chance, consider a top 25 final ranking for this 2023 season, or maybe get into the receiving boat so you're finishing somewhere in the 30s. I don't know. But that's what I think that's plenty possible. going back to what I was talking about with the defense, is if the West Virginia offense just looks, just like Penn State week 1, just up and down the field in bunches, attack mode, going full throttle, fast, and UNC's trying to, substitute on freshman players like we've seen in years like 2019 or 2012, and West Virginia's got a lot of young players that they're throwing out. Positioning and rotations are always, and getting play calls on the field. So I think like that's where West Virginia can potentially take some advantage, because you've got a lot of experience. Even though we're talking about a young core, but we're talking about, a fourth-year player at quarterback. We're talking about a very seasoned offensive line, and then the skill position players have really come on in these last 6 games. So I think West Virginia, and then on defense, again, I think it all comes down to health and motivation for this contest. So if West Virginia can just play it safe, and then finally, boom, something break, either a big defensive play like Darwin Cook's fumble return for a touchdown, or, you score a touchdown, you turn the ball over, then you score again on the very next play. Like if you watched Baltimore and San Francisco last night in the NFL contest, some quick scores back to back, to just boom, quickly, it's like a 2 to 3 score game, and then West Virginia can go and bury them. So that's what I want to see for West Virginia to do this. And then, we're talking about some of the second stringers and third stringers getting playing time into the second half, something that we haven't really got to see with this West Virginia time this year. West Virginia hasn't had very many. I can really think of Cincinnati, and West Virginia still played its starters deep into the fourth quarter of that contest. So we got to go really almost a single game as the Duquesne game to talk about a time when we got to see some of these younger players get onto the field and get some experience. So I think that would only help. I think that would only help going into this 2024 offseason when you're looking at position groups like cornerback, like safety, that we need to see an Aiden Tagaloa Nelson get onto the field, Raleigh Collins. We need to see the Jackson brothers. Let's see some of the guys in the secondary, and then can some of these guys on the offensive line potentially who have just been chomping at the bit. I feel like a guy like Sully Weidman, who I don't want to say this too loud because could probably start at some other Power 5 teams out there, or Power 4 now, who is just kind of trapped on the depth chart behind Wyatt Milam and Doug Nestor. And now next year, if West Virginia either goes the portal or they trust Weidman to come in and start at right tackle, that's another guy that I want to see. What does this upstart group of second stringers on the offensive line look like? I'm very, very confident in what I've seen out of the first grouping. What do we see out of the second grouping? And then, of course, my man Nico Marchiol. Can he get onto the field and put up some kind of numbers just like Harold did in his game against Campbell? So my prediction for this game, as we round out just over 40 minutes for today's video here on Tuesday afternoon, coming up almost on a day out from the Duke's Mayo Bowl, I'm going to go with a prediction. I'm going to go with a big one. I'm going to say West Virginia blows out this spread. We're not going to see a performance like we did against Baylor. It's going to be completely different, and this is what we've been looking for all season. I'm going to say 48-16. I think West Virginia, scores 6 touchdowns. And, if you look at the way that Cincinnati game played out, I think that's very capable with a couple extra field goals. So, so the West Virginia either doesn't convert in the red zone, just kicks a field goal and it's early. So I just like that score. And also North Carolina might score 1 with starters early, and then when West Virginia pulls in its second and third stringers late into the contest, they score another touchdown. So throw in a field goal somewhere and with a good kicker that they have. So I'm 8-4 on my predictions for the season, flipping my one prediction from the preseason that I made in a preview video, that being the Baylor game, saying preseason West Virginia would lose to the Bears, then flipping it. So I am 8-4, just as the way the Mountaineers have gone this season. So let's see, can I match the Mountaineers win for this season and get to 9 wins for West Virginia? And why I like that number at 48 is I'm watching also one of my predictions preseason. West Virginia is right at where I predicted them to finish in a points per game standpoint, both offensively and defensively. So they're 31.6 points per game offensively. I preseason said they'd score 32 points per game. And then they're at 27.5 points per game allowed defensively. I said they'd be at 27 flat. So to get down to 48 and 16, it'd get there. So I would also consider that a success. I'd consider that a win for Neil Brown and win for this team. And to continue on that trend over the course of the next month and next few months with the things that they need to do that I outlined on that list a few shows ago, so that this can be like a really, really positive off season and looking ahead to 2024 with a lot of momentum. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Can't wait for this Duke's Mayo Bowl. How do you feel? How do you feel about some of the things that I said? Love to hear your comments here in the comments section, or you can catch me at Carson_Fox27. Like this video on YouTube so more Mountaineer fans can see it across social media. And then seriously, check out some of my other videos on this channel. If you like high school recruiting, check out my video from last week on National Signing Day and hearing about West Virginia's 2024 class, or go back a few videos ago when I talked about, it was right before the Cincinnati game, what West Virginia needs to do, not only over the course of this month into December, but looking ahead for 2024, what are the most important factors that West Virginia needs to do in retention and transfer recruiting. So thanks everybody. I'll be back on Thursday. We'll recap this game, good, bad, or indifferent, see what happens from it. So we'll break that all down on Thursday, and I hope you enjoy this one, the Duke's Mayo Bowl 2023 from Charlotte, North Carolina. We'll be back then. Hail West Virginia. Go Mountaineers.